moment and the scaling that's possible within these AI companies is unparalleled to even those hyper-growth moments of before, and so excited to talk about it today. And I think, our headline that we submitted for the event was 0 to 7 figures. And I think we already are at 0 to 8, and so maybe I'll just open it up, Jesse, if there's any sort of general commentary that you want to offer about that trajectory, or we can just dive into sort of the how.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, so we started the company late 2023. This was after GPT-4 came out. I think, like many people, we were very interested in what sort of things the models could do, and you could build agents, and it was very early days at that point. I think we did a whole process of finding the right market to build in. And I think that was very helpful because the rate of your growth, I think, in my opinion, is mostly determined by which market you're in. And so we figured out, hey, customer service is going to be probably the big first use case for AI agents. I think in hindsight, that's roughly turned out to be true. And there's just so many large companies out there that are willing to kind of invest in this because they can see the ROI and they can make a very credible argument of why they should invest in AI. And so, yeah, growth was really fast in the first year. We essentially went from 0 to 8 figures in ARR, and it's mostly on the back of, like I said before, right? People can see the ROI, and so it's easier to justify them partnering with us and kind of spending because they know that, hey, if we spend $250K, we can point to $800K in savings because the AI agent's able to do all these things that we had to pay humans for before.
Cool. So, you touched on sort of studying the market, choosing a good market. I think one of the key things we've observed is just the degree to which you know your customer, and maybe this is sort of a platitude in company building, is that you should really deeply understand your customer. But I think, what does that mean in practice? What did you do at the founding of the company? What are you continuing to do as you build to stay close and build that deep customer understanding?
Yeah, I mean, at the beginning, you don't have any customers, right? So you're basically just talking to potential customers, and the goal with those conversations is to figure out what they actually get value from. And there's not really a great way to do that consistently. You just have to build a lot of intuition in these conversations. So, for example, you could be talking with the wrong person and they're feeding you stuff that's not really that useful and you waste time building it. Or you talk to someone and they're super excited about this sort of product you're pitching, but you get to the end of it and it's oh, they're not actually willing to pay that much for it. And so they were excited about it, but there's not really much there. So a lot of the knowing your customer piece is to have these conversations and be really aggressive about what they actually care about and what they're willing to pay for and what they will actually get value from. And so I think we did that process pretty aggressively for this company, and I mean, that's how I mentioned before how we decided on this market. But our view is that you have to go through that process, otherwise you're just guessing at what people actually want.
And maybe give people a sense of sort of order of magnitude. How many customers were you talking to before you started building? What's the rate at which you're, obviously now you do have customers you can go and get feedback from, but yeah, order of magnitude, what were those conversations before you started actually writing code?
Yeah, order of magnitude maybe 100. So it was close over a month. We try to pack every day as much as possible with customer conversations. We would have a good conversation, and then we would kind of get some sort of commitment from them that hey, if we built this, how much is this worth to you type situation, and then we'd have all these conversations during the day, and then at night we'd kind of crank out the product and show it to them the next day. And the first thing you do is it's unlikely that it's going to be the final thing, and so you have to have a very open mind about iterating and trying new things. And eventually, once we had talked to enough people, I think we just felt enough signal of people pushing us towards this direction, and that's how you build conviction in what to work on.
And then a lot of what you're describing there is that early founder-led sales motion, which I know is a big part of the journey, but sort of how has that changed now as you're building a much bigger business, but how are you staying close to that customer feedback and customer understanding?
Yeah, we spend a lot of time with our customers. Pretty much every customer we have, we tend to generally work with only larger customers, but everyone we have, we spend a lot of time with them, weekly touch points at least. And that allows us to be super close to what they need and what sort of things are missing. And if someone feels like something is missing, they might not just proactively tell you. And so you do have to be proactive about getting them to share what they're thinking and what sort of things could be the next on the horizon for the product. So that's what we do now. And then obviously we're still a pretty young company. We're still doing a lot of go-to-market and sales and so on. And so I'm very involved in that, and a lot of our team is involved in that, not even just the salespeople, and that helps us stay pretty in tune with the customers and the potential customers and so on.
And this wasn't the first company you'd founded, so were there any lessons learned from prior experiences, or maybe in your community of founders? Are there traps that you see folks falling into in this bucket?
Yeah, so before this, I started a different company. It was eventually acquired by Niantic, and then that company was a consumer company, so very different. But probably the biggest learning was along the lines of the discovery process, where for that company we just did too much of the sitting by ourselves and thinking about what would be a good idea, and then building that and doing that over and over again. And it was quite tough because we were grinding pretty hard, and eventually we just launched a bunch of things that had no traction whatsoever. And that's when people tend to burn out more. And so I think the biggest learning for us was to not do that, and instead just spend a lot of time with our customers beforehand.
Okay, the next big kind of pillar that you've been super thoughtful around is team building. When you and I first met, actually, I think I was first sitting with your co-founder because you were closing employee number 5, and it was amazing to see sort of your focus on talent and hiring, especially at those early days, but it's continued and been, I think, a really important source of sort of differentiation. So how do you think about getting the right people on the team?
Yeah, I think the team is more or less a reflection of what the founders care about. And so whatever my co-founder and I thought were important, I think that's reflected in our team currently. We're very proud of the team we built. It's obviously a mix of sales, go-to-market, engineers, PMs, deployment folks, and so on. And everyone has different preferences. I would say for us, we knew we wanted an in-person environment. So even today, we're essentially 100% in person. We really cared about having people that were very just intelligent and could adapt easily to things, right? So I think that kind of selects for a certain profile at that early stage, where you're working with both engineers and salespeople and people to be very comfortable in this environment where there's not that much structure and there's not that many rules to follow, and you can't just sit down and someone gives you a to-do list and stuff like that. So yeah, I don't think there's one right way to build a team. It's just the founders have to really be clear about what things they care about and what things they're not willing to move on. And then once you're able to find enough people, that kind of becomes the culture of the company, and then it just continues from there.
And then that's sort of the team as a reflection of the founders. Maybe do you want to talk about sort of finding your co-founder and what was important in that process, and how you guys came together?
Yeah, finding a co-founder I think is just very luck-based. It's the same thing as finding any other a good friend or a partner or whoever. My co-founder and I, we happen to be in the same stages of life, so we both started a company before that was acquired. I think we officially met through A16Z, who led our seed in the back of my last company as well, and so it's kind of happenstance. We have a lot of mutual friends, and I think the most important thing for co-founders is you have to be in a similar mind space. Your skill sets can be different, but the level of commitment, the working style, the type of company you want to build, I think if those are pretty aligned, then it's just a lot easier. And yeah, again, I think co-founder team, it's so variable because everyone is different, right? And every candidate you meet is also going to be different. So you have to just be open-minded and be open to new things, and eventually you'll find someone that I think is a great fit.
And would you have advice for anyone who's in that sort of co-founder dating stage? I feel like I talk to a lot of founders or sort of pre-founders who are in that exploration. What are the dimensions that are maybe okay to compromise on, and which are the ones that you think you should absolutely hold out, even if it means delaying starting your company as much as you may want to right now? What would you advise?
Yeah, so if you're looking for a co-founder, the easiest thing to do is just to experiment and build something together. I think that'll give both people or the whole group a really good sense of what it would be like. I think this is kind of unique to co-founders, because if people are considering co-founding, they probably do have the time to invest in this. if you're just hiring someone, maybe they have a full-time job, and there's not really much time for you to get like a trial in, so to speak. But for co-founding, you can definitely get a trial in. That'll be the best signal by far. I think the biggest thing you can't move on or negotiate on is just the level of commitment like people have to being a founder. And I think you'd be surprised, but I think there's a pretty wide range of that. And if one person is more committed than the other, then it's just not going to work no matter what. So that's the first one. And then probably the second one is just like working style. Like, are people working at roughly the same pace? Are people kind of like putting the same amount of time? Are people kind of gearing for the same types of goals, right? Like, some people want to build companies because their approach is what I mentioned before, which is like it's very customer first, and you're just kind of doing discovery. You're not tied to a certain specific idea. Other people might be more tied to specific technologies or specific types of companies that they want to build. And so I think if those things are aligned, you're generally good. And after that, it's just more of a personality thing, and that sort of thing you can really figure out in a trial.